Wildlings have invaded the realm before. John had heard tales from Old Nan and Maester Lewin, both back at Winterfell. Raymond Redbeard led them south in the time of my grandfather's grandfather, and before him there was a king named Bael the Bard. Aye, and long before them came the Horned Lord, and the brother kings Gendel and Gorn, and in ancient days Joramun, who blew the horn of winter and woke giants from the earth. This video is part of a series in which I discuss the old ways, the wall, and the true nature of them, based on a discovery I believe I've made about the wall. If you haven't seen part 1 of this series at least, make sure you go watch that, or this will not make a lot of sense, but assuming you're caught up, are you ready to learn about the Horn of Joramun? The Horn of Joramun has been talked about a lot in the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom, but it has always run up against a key contradiction that makes making theories about it next to impossible. The horn is said to have been blown and woken giants from the earth, and then brought down the wall. However, the wall is obviously still standing, and nobody knows how it would be possible that giants could be woken from the earth and that they would bring down the wall in the first place. And obviously if the wall had been brought down, it wouldn't still be standing, so the whole thing just doesn't seem to make any sense, but the wildlings seem absolutely positive that the Horn of Joramun, if blown, will bring down the wall. So what do we make of that? In the time that I have been preparing this video series, since I realized how the wall was built, I have been going over a bunch of old theories that people have talked about and realizing how this has been the missing piece to a lot of them. The Horn of Joramun is one of these cases. You can't unsee it, you can't look at anything the same again, and a lot of it makes more sense. Joramun's horn could have been blown to bring down the wall in the past with the new construction of the wall that we now understand. And, what's more, waking giants from the earth makes complete sense as well. He remembered the godswood, the tall sentinels armored in their gray-green needles, the great oaks, the hawthorn and ash and soldier pines, and at the center the heart tree, standing like some pale giant frozen in time. Those are the reflections of Tyrion Lannister as he thinks back on his time at Winterfell. Snow was falling on the godswood too, melting when it touched the ground. Beneath the white-cloaked trees the earth had turned to mud. Tendrils of mist hung in the air like ghostly ribbons. Why did I come here? These are not my gods. This is not my place. The heart tree stood before him, a pale giant with a carved face and leaves like bloody hands. That is the thoughts of Theon Turncloak when he returns to Winterfell. The heart trees are pale giants. When it is said that Bran the Builder had the help of the children of the forest and the giants to build the wall, it means that he had the help of the children of the forest and giant weirwoods, which we have already speculated is the case in part 1. That is what the story is telling us when it says the children and the giants. The giants that are woken from the earth when the Horn of Joramun is blown are the giant weirwoods within the wall, who could wake and shake the ice from their branches like a tree after a blizzard, or like the whomping willow in Harry Potter waking up after it's been snowed on, right? All of these weirwoods, if they were magically woken from the earth and shake free their branches, would break down the wall. But if you don't take the pumps out, if you don't remove the cold source, the wall would eventually regrow and rebuild itself, which means if the Horn of Joramun was blown in ancient times, as the stories say, and the wall crumbled and fell, and the branches broke free as the giants were woken from the earth, the wall could have over time rebuilt itself. So let's explore the clues around the Horn of Joramun, the tales of the ancient times when it was blown, and see if that makes sense. So I'll just come right out and say it. Going back over the evidence, knowing what I know now about the wall, I believe the evidence is overwhelming that the Horn of Joramun was blown at the time of Joramun, and the wall did, in fact, come down and break, but then eventually regrew itself. So here's what happened. The Night King rose at the Night Fort, A specific theory on the Night King himself will be covered in a different part of this video series. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for more of that. But it is worth noting, it is the war against the Night King, where Joramun, the king beyond the wall, teams up with Brandon the Breaker, the Stark in Winterfell, and they attack the Night King at his seat of power at the Night Fort and take him down. And again, it is worth noting that the Free Folk are 110% sure that the Horn of Joramun will genuinely bring down the wall. They spend a tremendous amount of time and resources up in the north digging through graves before they march on the wall, all in hopes that they can find this horn because they are genuinely convinced it will bring down the wall and could be used as a negotiation tactic. It is said Mance didn't want to blow the horn, he just wanted to have the threat there so that they would have to let them pass through the wall. So, if the horn wasn't a genuine threat, there would be no point in the first place. The Free Folk at the very least believe the horn works and will bring down the wall, and they expect the Night's Watch to believe it as well and respect the threat. There is also the name of the King of Winterfell at the time of this conflict, Brandon the Breaker. You could consider naming a king after an action they have done. Like, you could say if someone broke an expensive family heirloom like a chalice. The king's line had a royal glass chalice that's been passed down as a symbol of their power for 300 years, and then Billy broke it, and in history they remember him as Billy the Breaker. Well, maybe Brandon the Breaker was the guy who let the wall break on his watch. The wall was broken down by a king beyond the wall while he was the king, and that's why he's called Brandon the Breaker. Or perhaps he is the one who blew the horn of Joramun and broke the wall himself because the Night's King was ruling from the wall as his seat of power, right? Perhaps the king beyond the wall and the king of the north came together and did some sort of magic to create this horn, knowing that it could bring down the wall, because back in those days, it was still early enough that they knew what the wall was, and they knew if they woke the pale giants from the earth, they would shake free their branches, and the ice wall would collapse, but then could regrow. So they could destroy the Night King's seat of power, and then let the wall rebuild itself the same way it was built in the first place. So Brandon the Breaker being named the Breaker, the Horn of Joramun being named for the Wildling King who was in the same battle, and the fact that they were both fighting someone who was ruling from the wall, and won, kinda does track that maybe they brought down the wall using the Horn of Joramun, and that's why everyone thinks that that could happen. And suddenly, with the revelations we have had about the wall, we now understand why it's not a paradox to say the wall was brought down in the time of Joramun, and yet the wall is still standing today. The ice wall was brought down, but the true wall is weirwoods in an ice shell, the pale giants who would wake from the earth when the Horn of Joramun is blown, and will maybe wake again when it is blown later in our story. And the idea of a horn being blown to bring down the wall has mythological roots, like the walls of Jericho being brought down by a blowing of a horn. This is basically the same thing. George has just given himself a specific mechanism by which to bring down the wall. And it's really interesting to think about if that's a thing he's saving as a big reveal for when the horn is eventually blown, that these trees start to shake free and we see the wall come down. Perhaps at the epilogue of Winds of Winter, we're going to have a point of view on the wall as the horn is blown. It would make some sense then if George is saying Bran is incredibly hard to write because he knows too much. How the heck is he going to get Bran through an entire another book of Revelations and save the reveal of the true nature of the wall being weirwoods in an ice shell? How is he going to save that reveal until the wall comes down with Bran's POV? That could be an interesting contradiction that he is wrestling with as he tries to write Bran's chapters, which he has said is very difficult because of how much he knows. There is also the possibility that I want to bring up before the end of the video series, that maybe you have to blow the horn directly in front of the weirwood, right? It's not like you blow the horn once and the entire wall wakes up and shakes down. Maybe they had to blow the horn right out in front of the wall at the night fort, and then that specific weirwood wakes up and shakes its branches free and the wall cracks there. Or maybe like weirwoods, there's like a proximity range, right? Like it's only a certain area of effect spell, the Horn of Joramun. It doesn't maybe bring down the entire wall. I could see that being the case, because then you wouldn't have like the more dramatic story of everyone and their mother saw the time that the wall fell, and then they told their grandkids and grandkids and grandkids, so everyone's family has a story of like, oh yeah, that time the entire wall fell, yeah, we remember that. Well, maybe it was just the wall in certain proximity to the night fort where the Horn of Joramun was blown that came down, and it was at this big battle against the Night King, which is all kind of shaded in history anyway, and a lot of it is lost. So maybe they just kind of buried all of that, and they were able to because you only blow the horn in front of like one of the giant weirwoods, and that pale giant wakes from the earth, and then the rest of the wall maybe never fully came down. But remains to be seen. A lot of this stuff remains to be seen. It's also perhaps worth questioning who blew the horn in the time of Joramun. Was it Joramun himself? Was it the Night King who slew Joramun and took his horn and did blood magic on it and tried to bring down the wall so that the others could come back and invade? Was it Brandon the Breaker, who maybe took the horn from Joramun and blew it himself so that the wall could come down and the Night King could be defeated? Who knows? Any of the three do make sense depending on how you want to view the story of Joramun, Brandon the Breaker, and the Night King. It's a really interesting thing to start speculating on, and now that we know how the wall was built, and now that we know the wall could have been brought down, it really does feel like it opens up an entirely new era of possible speculation in everything regarding the wall. So there is going to be perhaps some more parts to this series as I make more revelations. This video represents a shift in how I'm going to handle this series from trying to cover like 2 or 3 different related topics in one episode to just going topic by topic for each episode for as long as it takes to cover every new interesting thing that comes up. The more you look at the story through this lens of understanding what we believe the wall now is. So, all I ask of you is that you hit that like and subscribe if you've made it this far, or if you feel like you are learning something about the story. I personally feel like I am learning something about the story every time I do some more research now that I have come to this realization, and I am very excited to share it with all of you, and I'm excited to get people's thoughts, see what the community thinks, what sort of new theories pop up if everyone agrees with this, or if anyone can poke any holes in my theory on how the wall was constructed. So what I ask of you is to share this with someone who you talk about A Song of Ice and Fire with. You all have that person or that place on the internet where you go to share ideas about A Song of Ice and Fire. Send them the Old Ways series, starting with episode 1 on how the wall was built, and let's get some discussion into the fandom to see if people can come up with anything new and interesting based on this idea. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all with something else very soon.